If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And mama in this instance is pretty much every TCU fan that I've talked to the last week. Let's break it down. Let's break it down on Frogs Insider. Hey, Frog fans, welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Melissa Treebwasser. Episode 106, In Your Ears. Melissa, how are you doing on this fine evening?
Jamie, I'm playing hurt. I got a fat lip, my first ever camera injury yesterday. It was so cold. I know we both have had long weeks. It's Wednesday. We're recording a little later than normal.
Dudes.
Yeah, it's been that kind of week. But it's also we took a big old gut punch here as TCU fans over the last couple of days. So the TCU fan in me is feeling a little under the weather, if you will.
That's fair, and it's getting colder here in Fort Worth as well, so we're all bundled up under that weather as well. But we're going to break down a lot on the show tonight. I talked a little bit about Jeremiah Donati taking the South Carolina job last week. We haven't gotten Melissa's thoughts on that, so we will get that from her tonight. We're going to talk about TCU receiving an invitation to the New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque, New Mexico against Louisiana. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about transfer portal. We're going to talk a little bit about hoops because Sunday was a long day.
Tough day
for TCU fans, and we haven't really gotten into that yet, even though we are recording this a couple days later. So before we get into all of that, though, we do need to tell you guys about our presenting sponsor because we are Frogs Insider, presented by the Flying T Club. The Flying T Club is TCU's NIL collective. They're TCU's only NIL collective, and they provide they partner with over 130 TCU student athletes, organizations all around the city of Fort Worth doing really good work in the neighborhoods and in the community. And it's December, right? So we're thinking about the holidays. We're thinking about end of year. Obviously, tax season is coming up right after the New Year's when you can start filing your taxes, right? So what better way to finish 2024 than to make a tax-deductible donation to the Flying T Club. You go to flyingtclub.com. You can make an individual gift that's one-time gift. You can start a recurring gift if you want to give monthly. You can reach out to them about doing a corporate partnership if you're a business owner and you want to get involved at that level with the Flying T Club. You can read about player stories. You can learn more about the coaches. You can see what organizations they're partnering with all around the city of Fort Worth. Flying T Club is a 501c3 nonprofit, which means that your gift is tax deductible. Get your end of year gifts in right now so you can get that sweet, sweet tax write-off on your taxes next year. And you also get Horned Frog priority points. I think we've been saying that the last couple of times because that just came true back in October, I believe, is when they started doing that, retroactive to March. But if you make a gift at the end of the year, you get that tax deduction in April, and you get Horned Frog priority points that you can use to upgrade your seats next football season. So now's the best time ever to go to flyingtclub.com, make a gift over there, and learn more about the organization. Also,
well
big
said.
shout out. Thank you. Also, a big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network. You can go wherever you get your podcasts, search up Republic of Football Network, and our feed will pop up. It'll be this show, and it'll be a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas, all in one feed. Super easy access. You'll be the smartest Texas football fan of all time if you listen to the Republic of Football Network. If that sounds like too much, though, because it is 13 D1 football podcasts, just search Frogs Insider. You can get our show. We do multiple shows a week that don't always all show up on the Republic of Football Network feed because otherwise it gets a little crowded. And we also have our YouTube channel over at Frogs Insider. Just search us up on YouTube. You'll see the channel. We're growing crazy. I think we crossed 1,400 subscribers today. Leave us a comment there. Leave us a comment on the Haley Van Lith videos because those ones are always the ones that do the best.
Yeah. Ask us about Maddie Shear's injury status. Yeah.
Ask about Maddie Shear over there. For those that don't know, she's redshirting. She's got a back injury. Anyways, Frogs Insider YouTube, Frogs Insider podcast stream, Frogs Insider right here in your ears always. That's where we like to be. Melissa.
Jamie.
Jeremiah Donati was hired to be TCU's athletic director on December 11th, 2017. We are recording this podcast exactly 7 years later on December 11th, 2024. And he is no longer the athletic director at Texas Christian University, having been hired away by South Carolina, announced last week, 6 days ago now, on Thursday afternoon, as South Carolina's new athletics director. the joys of working for a public school, Melissa, his salary was announced alongside his hiring, and I would have probably gone to South Carolina for $1.9 million too.
It is hard to be upset at the choice that he made for a lot of reasons. I think money is certainly a part of it. I think as much as we want to talk about the SEC in a lot of different ways, there's a little bit more stability. You've got a national champion women's basketball program. You've got a baseball program with a lot of really good history, and a football program that, I mean, was within a whisper of the college football playoff this year. It's not a bad situation for Jeremiah. And you said he's been at TCU for a good length of time. You don't see generational athletic directors anymore, like you don't see generational football coaches anymore. So I think he made a right move for him. TCU's going to be under a lot of leadership upheaval here in the next 6 months, or leadership differences. But I think I've seen a lot of things. There's a lot of mixed feelings about this from TCU fans, but I think it's important that we acknowledge that he, for the most part, knocked his hires out of the park. He kept some really good coaches. Dave Raditi, Dixon. You can say what you want about him, but he's kept him, in the fold.
Eric Bell.
Eric Bell is a big one.
Karen Manez.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has happened under his watch that's positive. He's been a really effective fundraiser. I mean, that performance facility, was probably his legacy project at TCU. So I think that it's certainly a loss. That being said, change doesn't have to be a bad thing. And TCU has an opportunity to get an outside perspective. I mean, Donati was the AD for 7 years, but he was a part of TCU's athletic department for 13. Is that correct? 11 or 13?
2011 is when he got here, yeah.
2011. So, yeah, for 13 years. So, a fresh voice and a fresh perspective. And, if they go an outside hire, which it looks like they intend to do, I think that there can be some real positive momentum gleaned from a change at the top.
I think you're totally right. And what I said last time on the episode, which was after your interview with Talia Goodman, after my conversation with Jeremy Clark, so I don't know how many people actually heard it, was when you're doing things well, other people want to hire your people.
Yeah.
And we've seen that a couple different times at the athletic director spot, with Del Conte going to Texas and Jeremiah now going to South Carolina. We've also seen a slew of deputies and senior ADs head to other programs as well, and some of those names are now fan favorites for wanting them to come back and be the head person at TCU. So we'll see how the search goes. TCU did announce earlier this week that they are doing a national search. They're using a consulting firm called Turnkey, which should be familiar to TCU fans. It's the same consulting firm they used when they hired Sonny Dykes. It's the same consulting firm they used when they hired Kirk Sarlos. So they've used this organization before. I believe it's the same search firm they used when they hired Mark Campbell as well. I'd have to double check on that. But
hopefully there's at least one outside hire out of their history.
I believe Campbell and maybe Jason Williams, although I don't know if they hired a consulting firm to hire Jason Williams. I mean, the reality, I know you joke about the internal hires and stuff, but realistically, Sonny wasn't an internal hire. They used that, right? Jeremiah was an internal hire. They would have had to have been blown away by someone nationally to not hire Jeremiah at the time. But I think you're right. They're going to go outside of the organization now. That's going to bring in a fresh perspective. I think they're going to inherit an athletic department that's in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
From a coaching perspective, from a staffing perspective. And I think that, like you said, it's an opportunity for some freshness, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Interim AD is Mike Sinkfield, who's been at TCU since 1995. So I think, there's going to be a really nice balance in the athletics department of a fresh perspective and then also institutional knowledge, right? Like Sink is, I don't know anybody who knows more about TCU than Mike Sinkfield. And that's incredibly valuable when you're trying to onboard someone new. And then you also still have the relatively fresh perspective of a guy like Ryan Peck. You have more institutional knowledge, and I'm going to butcher her last name, but Gretchen Booten has been here for a really long time. Like there's some really smart folks over in the athletics department, and I think that regardless of who the hire ends up being at AD, they're going to be capable of moving the ship in the right direction. Melissa, if you were the new AD at TCU, what do you think would be the biggest goal set forward for you by the leadership of the university?
Ooh, by the leadership. I think that's a great question. I think that where TCU is right now is a matter of asserting themselves as a flagship program in the new Big 12, prioritizing NIL and continued fundraising. You've got some big projects. Lupton is the easy one. There are some facilities that need to be upgraded. Tennis is another one. I think positioning yourself to be an attractive target for the next future of college football, right? Like I think football has to continue to drive the bus, and so I think that's got to be the priority, and that means NIL, that means facilities, that means fan engagement.
Yeah, it does, and it's all about positioning yourself to be desirable.
Yeah,
and that's going to be the goal, whatever that looks like for the next person. We should know pretty quickly here who that's going to be. The university did lay out a timeline of 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow, which is very aggressive.
It's very aggressive. For context, for some comparison there, South Carolina started their search in September.
Yeah.
And so it was a similar timeline, maybe a little bit longer, probably 8 weeks, that South Carolina took. So we should know who TCU's next athletics director is before the end of January, probably by mid-January.
Can we do a fun thought exercise?
Sure.
Like, aside from the things we know have to be prioritized, which, is number one, like positioning yourself for the next round, what's like the one athletics experiential thing that you hope some fresh eyes can impact?
Ooh. I only get one?
Oh, no. I'll give you as many as you want.
Okay. I think there are a couple different things that need to be addressed. Some of them are going to be addressed already in the campus master plan and the strategic plan that TCU has laid forth over the last couple months. I might link those in the show notes this week for people, because I think it's really valuable for people to take a look at, because you'll get a really good understanding of what TCU's vision is to do some of the things that you were just talking about, Melissa, about making yourself a desirable university to keep yourself on the inside. It's important
to read that if you care about TCU, I think.
Yeah, fully agree. So the things that I really want that are going to happen at some point are better facilities for baseball. I think Lupton needs a facelift pretty badly at this point. That's in the campus master plan. Basketball, I think both men and women need designated practice space and weight rooms. Not necessarily one for men, one for women, but just a space where only basketball does basketball activities. Right now, TCU is the only school in the Big 12 whose men's squad shares a practice court, shares a weight room, shares a nutrition space, shares med space. All of that is shared space for men's basketball and for women's basketball, and they share it with volleyball too. And that's just not enough space for three programs that TCU wants to see thrive do what they need to do to be able to thrive. So part of the campus master plan is also creating more indoor facilities for basketball to practice, having multiple practice courts, so that people aren't having to practice on Schollmeyer, on in the practice facilities. Weight rooms are going to be a little bit more separated out. So I think all of that is really, really necessary. I think the one kind of experiential thing, though, that I really want to see TCU step up their game is on-campus tailgating. I think there is such an opportunity on that berm in front of the stadium, that little green space where they had Big Noon Sunday, where game day potentially could be where the Barstool show set up one time to have a more active, big Grove style situation where you're getting student organizations and some of the bigger tailgates right there next to the stadium rather than spread out all over Kingdom Come in parking lots where folks still have to walk a quarter of a mile or a whole mile to get to the stadium. So I think finding a way to enhance the tailgating scene, maybe a little bit more pregame entertainment, pregame engagement for families. I know that there's Frog Alley, but it seems like it's not what it could be at this point. I just think there's a lot of opportunity there for a heightened game day experience, especially pregame, and then also I think stadium entertainment and in-game entertainment as well is another place where maybe they could look to upgrade a little bit. I think they've come a long way in both of those areas, but I still think there's some room for improvement. What about you? What do you think?
I mean, I think the game day, the in-game experience, like I completely agree with you on all the points you mentioned, Lupton, tailgating, all of those things. But to me, it was very eye-opening to see what Baylor is doing in game. And they're still, like, I still think that TCU could do more than what Baylor is doing. But Baylor, to me, felt like it was so far advanced to TCU, and that was frustrating. I remember when Del Conte first introduced Frog Alley, and TCU brought in the Disney like guest experiences people and paid a lot of money to have to get that kind of to create that environment and to up the fan experience. And when they did that, which is now it's probably been 15 years, it was a huge deal and it completely changed the game day atmosphere. But they haven't really done much since. And with the way TCU's campus is set up, like you mentioned, that berm, I think that's an awesome opportunity. I know they want to protect the quad, but there's also so much space there to do so many cool things. It's not enough anymore to just have a product on the field. And TCU, I mean, we saw fan attendance and fan engagement this year was really poor.
Yeah.
It was really poor. And part of that was probably the teams that you were playing and, you know, the one marquee game that you really had at home against a close rival. You know, you had Tech, which was pretty well attended, but cleared out at halftime because TCU was down big. And then Oklahoma State was so bad that by that point nobody cared. But you had fans not showing up and not staying when they did show up. And that's a really bad look when we think about the future of college football. So finding more ways. I know I've seen everybody mention purple LED lights and the banners and all of those things. Those are easy fixes where you don't have to make wholesale changes. They just cost money. TCU should have plenty of that. But the experience around experience in and the in-game entertainment itself, I think you could definitely modernize and update that to make it more appealing to today's students as well as the young families and that next generation of TCU fans that you're trying to get committed.
Yeah, I agree. But that's all I think going to be addressed by the campus master plan, the strategic plan, by the new AD when we learn their name here in probably less than 2 months at this point, which I'm really looking forward to seeing who that is. One thing that I don't know, trying to think of a segue here that's positive about looking forward. Looking forward on the calendar. TCU is playing in a bowl game. They went 8-4 in the Big 12. They are going to the New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque. They will be playing a 10-3 Louisiana team who lost to Marshall in the Sun Belt Championship. December 28th at 1:15 p.m. Central Time is the kickoff on ESPN. And Melissa, there was a lot of drama, a lot of rumor, a lot of accusation that happened on Sunday and in the ensuing days when Frog fans learned that they were going to be in the New Mexico Bowl. I saw it on Twitter. I saw it on Facebook. I saw it certainly on the board.
It made the board. Yeah, I'm certain there was 7 or 8 threads about that one that I noticed.
We were sitting there at Dickey's trying to cover basketball, and all Jeremy's doing is replying to people in bowl threads.
Well, he's a basketball hater anyway, so it's fine.
He's fighting for his honor as well. And So we learned on Sunday morning that TCU was going to go to the New Mexico Bowl. Obviously, that didn't get published until early afternoon. But here's the reality of the situation when it comes to bowl selection, and in this year specifically. You had 4 8-4 Big 12 teams: Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU. Kansas State, I don't think played any of those teams.
Yeah.
Tech, Baylor, and TCU all played each other and went 1-1. So you had a situation where standings didn't really dictate clearly who was going to go where. We knew Iowa State was going to go to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. We knew it was probably going to be Colorado and BYU in the Alamo Bowl because of the Pac-12 tie-in there. And then it was the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, the Liberty Bowl, the Texas Bowl, fighting really kind of over 4 teams.
Yeah.
Baylor was higher on the Texas Bowl's list because they had beaten TCU. They have a strong alumni base in Houston. They knew ticket sales were going to be really good from Baylor fans, especially after last year for Baylor folks. So they took Baylor. The Rate Bowl knows that they're probably going to get more Kansas State fans to Phoenix than they would TCU fans or Texas Tech fans because Kansas State travels incredibly well. And by the same logic, the Liberty Bowl knew that Texas Tech was probably going to get more fans to travel to the Liberty Bowl than TCU would because of the fan base size and their willingness to travel. And so when you get to that point, all of a sudden those 3 bowls are already spoken for. And now you have a situation where TCU falls into the ESPN-owned kind of assignment bowls. And so they end up in New Mexico against Louisiana. That is the only invitation that TCU received. TCU did not turn down the Liberty Bowl, like people are asking. They didn't get an invite to the Liberty Bowl, right? Now, does back channeling happen? Sure. Every year back channeling happens. Am I privy to some of those conversations? Occasionally, but I'm not this year. And so I don't know what back channeling happened, if any, but I do know that the Liberty Bowl never invited TCU. So there wasn't a chance to decline an invitation to the Liberty Bowl. TCU is going to be playing a 10-3 football team that wants to beat them. I do know that. And so TCU better come ready on December 28th. They started practice today, the day that we are recording this. So Frog fans, you know, I think the last thing I'll say before Melissa gets to speak for the first time in like 6 minutes is fans obviously love the bowl experience because they get to travel, see a new place, watch their team play an extra game. It's really fun. But the reality is that bowl games are for players. Mm-hmm. They get pampered, they get gifts, they get extra practices with their teammates, they get to play football one more time. And for the coaches, it's a real opportunity, especially in this era, to get some young guys on the field and let them play. Because the bowl game doesn't count against your red shirt requirements. So Haas Haney, even though he's already played 4 games this year, he can play in the bowl game because it doesn't count towards his red shirt. So he's not going to lose his red shirt by playing a 5th game because it's the bowl game. So I would suspect that this is a really cool opportunity for TCU fans to see some of the younger faces that haven't played as much get some serious run alongside Josh Hoover and some of the other guys that are returning next year. Potentially Savion Williams and Jack Besh, according to Sonny Dykes, who met with the media earlier this week. So is it the most fun bowl that TCU could have gone to? No. But when you look back on a season after 10 years, you're just going to see 9-4 or 8-5, right? And I think that frustrations in the moment really boiled over this week for TCU fans. I think it was coupled with the Donati news, coupled with some other frustrations as well. But it's going to be okay. Albuquerque's a cool town. Everything's fine.
Yeah, Albuquerque's a cool town. Making a bowl is better than not making a bowl for all of the reasons that you mentioned. I was on that call when Sonny Dykes said that Savion Williams, listen, if Savion Williams plays, I'm not going to say I'm going to eat my shirt or something because we have a long history of these things not going well for us. But I would be very shocked and not like in a positive way if I saw Savion and Jack out there. Like now, if they want to come out and play a series or something for one last go, like I'm all for that. I do not want to see Savion running the ball 15 times. It makes no sense. He's way more valuable to TCU with a good draft combine and all of those things than he is playing in the New Mexico Bowl. And no shade whatsoever to the New Mexico Bowl, but I very much understand TCU fan frustrations. You go 8-4, which is a good record. And you are in a situation where winning a game against the third string quarterback of a group of 5 team doesn't really do anything for you other than get you to 9 wins, which is a big deal. And if you lose that game because you aren't taking it seriously, it's a really sad, exclamation point on a season of like kind of what could have been. So I think I'm not excited about TCU making a bowl game. Like I said, making a bowl game is really important. It's important for the practices. It's important for the young players. It's great experience for the players themselves. But you can't take this lightly if you're TCU. Said this is a very motivated Louisiana team that wants to win, because a win against TCU will be a huge, kind of punctuation for Michael Desmarais, the coach. Whereas, losing to TCU is justifiable. TCU wins, and they said they beat third string quarterback of a G5 team. They lose, and it's humiliating almost, even though it is a 10-win team. So it's cool for Sonny. I was on that call, like I said. He talked about, he's still got some friends in the area. He spent some time there as a kid. I think he's got some family in the area. So there's some positives. Albuquerque's cool. Santa Fe is close by. Santa Fe is super cool. It's a good time of year to be in a place like New Mexico. I don't think it's going to be well attended, not just because of the bowl, but travel to Albuquerque is very expensive because of the date and getting there. So I don't know that TCU will be super well represented at that game. But, I mean, I'm going to watch. I'm going to be excited to watch. I probably won't make it because of how close it is to the holidays. But I think it could be a good opportunity. We might get to see a lot of Haas, like you said, and a lot of some of these young wide receivers that I know people are excited about. So I think that there is some righteous frustration among the fan base just because of the way the season played out. We've talked about this ad nauseum at this point, but it's a little bit of a hollow 8 wins when you think of how things played out. But it's still 8 wins with the chance to get to 9. An opportunity to continue to install your culture, and for a team that Sonny Dykes has said all season and continues to say really likes each other, to play together one more time. And that in itself is pretty cool.
It is. And look, I don't have much else to say about it, frankly. It's not the best bowl in the world. It would have been cool to be somewhere else. I was personally hoping for either Houston or Memphis.
Yeah. Well, have you seen the Liberty Bowl's construction?
It's torn to shit.
I am
and
fine.
Tech fans are pretty pissed too, and Frog fans hear this. If you haven't gone over to the Tech board, or if you haven't interacted with a Tech fan in the last couple of days, go ask them how they're feeling about the Liberty Bowl, because half that stadium is dirt right now.
Yeah.
And terrible. They're playing Arkansas. Guess which team? Guess which team's fan base got the tickets to the side of the stadium that's still standing? Because it won Texas Tech.
Yeah.
They got the quarter section, end zone section for their fan tickets, while Arkansas got the older, still built part of the stadium.
It would have been really fun to play Arkansas, though.
I would have loved it.
I would have
been great. But anyways, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
right?
It's not a big deal.
And it gives you an opportunity to look at some young guys and really just decompress, right? Yeah. I've gone back and forth right now. I'm feeling like I'll probably end up driving out there for it, just to go out there and watch the game and cover some of those guys for the last time.
Yeah.
But it is what it is at this point. We can't control everything, and it would just be really disappointing to go out there and lose, I think.
Yeah.
Is the biggest part of it. Yes, again, December 28th at 1:15 p.m. on ESPN, TCU takes on Louisiana in the Isla, New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Indeed.
It'll be really interesting. Melissa, let's talk portal briefly before we get into some other things here, because TCU has some folks visiting, some folks that have offers now that I think are of note. First of all, if you were Sonny Dykes, Melissa, and you were looking at your roster and thinking, okay, we got the number 23 overall high school recruiting class. We signed a bunch of players. We are returning a bunch of players in the development cycle for the first time in a couple seasons now. But we still need X, Y, and Z out of the transfer portal. What are your X, Y, Z? What are your 3 big positions that you're looking for out of the transfer portal this offseason?
I mean, number one, you've got to have a proven wide receiver.
Yeah.
You need a veteran. I think an outside wide receiver. I think that's super obvious. It's the first thing everybody would say. Number 2, probably looking at a tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like probably, you lose Bless and you get some guys and you return some guys, but I'd like a dog. I want a dog on that offensive line.
Yeah.
And then number 3, when you look at graduation and Jamel Johnson being in the portal, you need a safety or a corner. I would really take either kind of, but probably some secondary help. And that does leave out some positions of need as well, where you could probably use one good veteran. But those are probably my 3 biggest priorities right now, from getting some veteran experience at those positions and needing to, wanting to improve or give a bump to the talent available.
I would agree. I would still add defensive line into that mix as well.
I agree with that.
Just because you're losing 3 guys who were heavy in the rotation this year. So TCU has already been active in the transfer portal. It officially opened on Monday, December 9th. They've been handing out a lot of offers. They're hosting some guys for visits this weekend, including a guy that briefly committed to TCU last year before heading to an ACC school. Mm-hmm. And I think he's probably
school with an interesting new coaching change,
which we can talk about in just a second. But Howard Sampson, the former North Texas offensive tackle, committed to TCU during the portal season last year before ending up at North Carolina. He started every game at left tackle for North Carolina this year. He posted pretty good PFF grades. I think he was right around a 70 for his season grade on PFF, which is, comparatively speaking, pretty good.
Yeah.
And he has legitimate interest in TCU. TCU has legitimate interest in him, and it looks like the Frogs are going to get him in for a visit here this weekend. So big opportunity to shore up some of that tackle spot, because they didn't only lose Bless Harris, they also lost Mike Nichols. Yeah. Mike Nichols may have faded in the back half of the year and lost his starting job to Ben Taylor Whitfield, but that's still a 5th-year senior that you're losing out of that rotation at tackle. So getting Howard Sampson in is going to be really important for the Frogs to pull off. He's got a ton of attention in the portal right now. Georgia's coming after him. Like, a lot of schools are coming after him. But I think TCU is in pretty good shape for Howard Sampson. You mentioned wide receiver. I'm going to say a name that I know you know. I want to see if you know where you know it from. Joseph Manjack IV.
Wasn't he an A&M? No?
TCU's played him the last 2 years.
Played him the last 2 years. I mean, so it has to be Baylor or Tech, right?
Nope.
No. I'd have no idea.
That would be Houston Cougars wide receiver Joseph Manjack.
Oh, yeah. He's a returner too, right?
Yes, who in 2023 had a really good game against the Frogs.
Was he the one that had the double move on Bud?
Yep.
And had that 70-yard or 50-something yard completion?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Let me go to this game real quick. He had 4 catches for 50 yards against TCU last year. This year he didn't have as many opportunities.
They didn't throw the ball.
They didn't really throw the ball a ton. He only had 2 for 21 against TCU this year. He started his career somewhere else, and why is ESPN's page has sucked lately? Oh, he started at USC in 2021.
Okay.
And then he was at Houston for the last 3 years. He's got 90 catches for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns for his career. He is kind of a hybrid of JPR and Jack Besh. I don't think he's I think he's kind of a blend, right? He's an outside receiver. He's 6'3", 205. He is someone that TCU is looking at really hard. They're also looking at Caleb Good, the Colorado State wide receiver that hit the portal recently, and Chase Sowell as well, the East Carolina kid who had a really strong season for the Pirates this year. Let me pull up Sowell's stats real quick. 34 catches for 678 yards and 3 touchdowns this year for the Pirates. And then Good had, let me go to him, 21 receptions for 436 yards and 4 touchdowns. So some veteran guys who have some experience can come in and compete. You hope maybe you land 2 of those 3 guys to go along with Dozie Ezukanma, who we didn't see at all this year because he redshirted, but wow, he looked great in fall camp. Obviously, Eric McAllister is back. You potentially have tight end Chase Curtis coming back as well. He's waiting on a medical waiver. So you still got some weapons, but getting a couple of those wide receivers I think would be really good. There's another kid, though, Melissa, and this is the kid that I might be really excited about. Ansel Din Mbu, I think is how you say his last name. The Washington State defensive tackle had 6 sacks from his DT position this year, which is insane. Pretty crazy. Excited about him to get a little bit more beef, a little bit more experience in that defensive line. I was so sad when Hakeem Ajijalaya got hurt this year because he was coming on late. He was one of those guys who had some experience somewhere else, came in, took him a minute to acclimate, and then was really starting to take off before he got banged up. I think this kid from Washington State could be a lot like that. Maybe even get a little bit more of a jump start than Hakeem did. So,
and he's a local kid, right?
Like he's from Aledo.
He's the coming home kid.
Yeah. So all these kids are originally from Texas, which is kind of Sonny Dykes' MO, right? Is find a kid that went away, try to bring him back into the fold a little bit. But I think TCU's got some really strong leads in the portal this year, which has been a consistent trend under Sonny Dykes. They've got a hit on them, though, because I think they're going to take fewer guys in the portal than they have in recent years.
Yeah, I think that they're being very intentional. We saw them start to do this last year, and I think even more so this year, and really trying to fill needs and find guys that fit not just what they're doing on the field, but what they need in the locker room, too. You lose a lot of really great leadership this year too, and so bringing in veteran guys that are local guys that are probably going to have some maturity and some great leadership, I think will be important. And then you do also need to infuse with some talent, because you lose a ton of seniors. 31 seniors walked on senior day. Some of those guys might end up coming back. You're going to lose some guys in the portal because that's just the way that things go. So you need to be able to build on the positive momentum of the way you finished this year, because as we've said before, the schedule is ostensibly tougher in 2025. The opener, once again, is going to be one of those kind of games, as we learned today. So I think that 2025 is a really, really critical year. And you put over that you've got a new athletic director who didn't hire you as a coach. Like, I don't think that Sonny Dykes' seat is warm whatsoever in this moment. But if the bar will need to be raised and be expected to be raised, I think.
And I think there's a really good opportunity to do that. You mentioned the difficulty of the schedule. Yeah, I mean, they got Kansas State, Colorado, BYU, Iowa State, and Arizona State all on the calendar next year, none of whom were on the calendar this year. Yeah. So obviously that's a step up if those schools hold serve and are good again next season. Yeah. You still got Baylor. You don't get Texas Tech or Oklahoma State next year, which is 2 of TCU's wins this year. You don't get Central Florida next year, who's got an old new head coach going into next season. You do get West Virginia, who's got an old new head coach going into next year.
This year is crazy.
Just a bonkers coaching cycle so far. I've got a little note here to talk about it at the end some more. But before we get into that, Melissa, I think we should shift and talk a little bit of hoops. It was a tough Sunday for men and women. TCU men kicked off the day at Dickies Arena with an 83-74 loss to Vanderbilt, a 9-1 Vanderbilt team who's looking pretty good this year, but still, TCU shot their best from the field and from three-point percentage this year and lost this game by 9. How did they do that? 18 turnovers and 24 fouls, and they shot 14 of 26 from the free throw line and a 9-point loss. That was it was as frustrating of a basketball game as I've been at in recent memory, Melissa, simply because it was right there. Yeah. TCU had the lead for the majority of the first half until a prayer of a 3 at the buzzer put Vandy up a bucket going into halftime. And just the offense, when it wasn't turning the ball over, as weird as that is to say, when they could get into a set, for the most part, they executed the offense
Yeah.
really well. They got good looks. They hit open threes. They got really good looks around the rim. David Punch had a fantastic game. He had 11 points, 7 rebounds, and a pair of blocks. But just the turnovers, 18 turnovers, and it was bad passes. It was dribbling off of their foot. It was trying to save a blocked shot that was clearly going out of bounds and would have been TCU's ball, but for some reason you grab it, try to throw it back in. Just some really questionable decision making that even had Jamie Dixon kind of baffled, I think, in post game would be a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Like he said, I believe something, paraphrasing here, but he said there's just some things that I can't explain right now about what the team was doing with some of these turnovers, and that's kind of how I feel too. Like I just don't have words for some of it because this was a game that was easily winnable, and if you take care of business and you don't turn the ball over, you're talking about a TCU team that's 6-3, has won their last 2 games against top 100 Ken Pom teams, seems to be starting to gel and click, but instead it's, man, this is just not syncing up like we thought it would be or hoped it would be at this point in the season.
Yeah, it was just a really frustrating game. It was very sleepy. I mean, it had the vibes of an 11:30 tip-off and a pretty low-attended stadium at that point. It got a little bit, as the A&M and Tech people filled in, it got a little bit more buzzy in the second half, but just a very winnable game. We saw Frankie Collins get banged up. We saw Trey White get banged up. We saw Brendan Wenzel get banged up. So I don't know what their status is. They've had a nice long break with finals week, so hopefully things, we'll have them back when they return to the floor here in a couple of days. But yeah, just a very, it was kind of the things when we saw the best of what the TCU offense can be combined with like what we've kind of has been the bugaboo all season of just getting careless with the ball at times, not moving as a unit defensively, and then just some really just silly mistakes you don't expect from a team to make when they've played as many games as they've played together at this point. So I thought it was interesting. Ernest Uday talked a lot about effort and toughness and playing with grit. And when we mentioned that to Dixon in the post game, he thought the effort was really good. And so I think that this is an opportunity for Ernest to take up that mantle of I'm the only dude that's played these types of games before and knows what to expect in the Big 12 and take that leadership role. And he seems to want to own it. I thought his message in the post game was very direct of like, he understands that he's got to be the dude to kind of get people up to speed. So I think how they respond that next time out against, they play on Monday against South Alabama. They won't be tested theoretically the rest of the way. They've got South Alabama, Montana State, and then they head into Big 12 play with at Arizona for their first Big 12 game of the season. So 2 kind of get right games, but you're going to have to – this team cannot afford to play less than 100% effort and at about 90% of ability if they want to win games in the conference.
I agree. And what I need to see from them against these next 2 opponents is ill intent when it comes to rebounding, because they have not won the rebounding battle in their last 5 games. They got out rebounded by Alcorn State. They tied Xavier at 31 rebounds apiece. Against Vandy, they lost the rebounding battle 37-29.
Yeah. And Vandy was not very big.
And Vandy and TCU came into the game tied in rebounding per game for the season. So neither team has been very good at rebounding. Vandy got right, and TCU didn't.
Yeah.
And part of it is because I was having a conversation with someone, it might have been you, at the game, about how the kind of the style of rebounding that TCU needs to do because they are undersized. And when you have an undersized front court and Ernest is picking up a body to box out, or David Punch is picking up a body to box out, if they're stuck on a guy, they're not always necessarily going to get the rebound. You need your wings to be much more active on the glass than they have been to this point. Brendan Wenzel has done it a little bit. Trey White has done it a little bit. Posey and Manning have done it a little bit. We've seen Noah Reynolds and Frankie Collins rebound the ball actually pretty well. Frankie put up 7 the other day. I think Noah Reynolds had 5 against Vandy. 12 from your point guards is pretty good, but 12 of 29 means that someone's not doing the job well enough, and they've got to figure out a way to get right against these next 2 games. Because you're right, if they're not rebounding is so integral to what Jamie Dixon wants to do offensively, with getting out and running. When you aren't rebounding, that means you're not running, which means you're more reliant on your half-court offense, which the last few years has never been a machine, a well-oiled machine under Dixon. You're just really setting yourself up for an uphill battle. So we need to see some get right in these next 2 games. Hope it happens, because I really do like the talent on this team. I like the athleticism on this team. I think that if they figure it out, they can be a pain in the side of a lot of teams in the Big 12 this year and make some noise. They've just gotta get to that point where they've figured it out. And I think that your note about Ernest and Dixon in postgame is interesting, because I think even though Ernest was saying effort, he meant physicality, because he's a very physical player, and he's, by the way, his perimeter defense has taken an incredible step forward this year. But I think when Dixon heard it, he heard hustle, not physicality. And I think that there is a disconnect there, because they were hustling, but they weren't being terribly physical. And that needs to change.
Well, and these are guys, a lot of these, I mean, Frankie came from Arizona State. Ernest has been around, but most of these guys haven't played the level that they're going to be experiencing night in and night out. And so that does take a different level of physicality and grit, and that's got to be developed. And again, when you don't schedule, in general, a very difficult preseason, it's hard to develop that. Dixon made the effort to put some more challenging games on the schedule, and so they're seeing that, and they've been punched in the mouth twice, and they were the puncher once. And that's how you end up 1-2, right? So I think hopefully the lesson that they've learned and what Dixon takes to them is that we have to be the ones throwing the first punch. We can't wait and react. They have to be actionary, not reactionary. And that goes back to the rebounding, which Jamie has talked about ad nauseum in the post games. I've used ad nauseum twice, I think, in this podcast, which is crazy. But that it has to be all 5 dudes.
Yeah.
Like, they all have to crash. You're absolutely right, I think, in your assessment of why that matters and how that needs to look. So, again, this is not a team that is going to be competing to win the Big 12. I don't think that was the expectation going in. I don't think it should be the expectation. But I love your assertion of this should be a team that's a real pain in the side for other Big 12 teams. And I think if they take that attitude of the kind of the scrappy underdog, the spoiler, so to speak, I think they could win more games than we expect. But they're going to have to own that that's who they are, and you shouldn't feel like it has to be that way for a team that's been to the tournament now the last couple of years. But I think that's who they need to be this season.
And to be very clear, this team hasn't been to the tournament.
That's very true. Very true.
Not very many of these players have been
cheap,
to the tournament. But they have to want to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
They have to want that, and I think that is still a work in progress.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned punched in the mouth, Melissa. We're gonna shift 85-52, top 10 matchup at Dickies Arena. Number 3 South Carolina, number 9 TCU. We talked a lot about this being a benchmark. We talked a lot about really knowing what you're up against. And we all know that South Carolina is the defending national champ. Seeing them live, seeing them in person, knowing that this maybe is a South Carolina team that has taken a little bit of a step back from the national championship team a year ago. Holy cow. I mean, tall,
I saw a girl
long,
dunk on 6'7" Sedona Prince.
Yeah.
In front of me.
Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah.
They're long, they're tall, they're athletic, they're physical. They got away with a lot, frankly. And then
you get to do that when that's how you play every game.
Yeah, I think Houston on the men's side, right? Yeah. Like, it reminded me so much of how Houston plays, especially defensively. They are just in your face for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It is relentless, and you get no reprieve. And TCU hung with them for a quarter and then really just couldn't anymore and ended up losing by 33.
Which is less than Iowa State lost by.
By 7, I believe, right? So, hey, we'll be interested to see what happens when the Frogs and Cyclones get together this year. But look, I mean, I think it's better to happen on November 8th than in March. And I asked Mark Campbell post game, how do you keep, watching film and all of that stuff, analyzing this game is important, but how do you keep from overcorrecting? And I think he was really wise in what he said, is just treating it like what it is, and that's just one basketball game.
Yeah.
And he's like, we got punched in the mouth. We didn't play how we wanted to. But that's, we got to learn from it and then move on and kind of flush it. So, it was a nice benchmark. It didn't go the way they wanted. And it was definitely a step up in competition from even NC State and Notre Dame. So it was good for the women to get it out of the way. And hopefully if there's an opportunity for a rematch, they show up a little bit better the next time around.
Yeah, it was frustrating because you could tell that the physicality really got to them. The amount of, this was, Jamie Dixon, if he was watching that game, was probably salivating because of all the deflections. And that dude loves deflections more than he loves anything else in basketball. And I think the thing that was really not upsetting, but that was just so annoying was you could tell that the physicality got to TCU because they missed so many shots they would normally make. Sedona had a really tough game. She didn't finish around the rim. She wasn't hitting from outside. Haley started really slow and then you could tell the player she's played this game before. She finished with 20, even though everyone knew that she was getting the ball, and South Carolina pushed a lot of effort to try to slow her down. She was still super effective. Madison Connor never really got going. She couldn't make a whole lot happen. She had a couple of shots, but I think that those players learning how to rise to the moment in those games, how to deal with the physicality, because TCU is going to be a really good team. They are going to be in the mix to win the Big 12. They are going to be in the mix to be, a top 16 seed. Like Mark Campbell has said, that's his goal. I think all of those things are still right there in front for them. But they're not going to be the team that gets the calls like the way of South Carolina or, any of these other blue blood teams will. So they're going to have to learn to deal with that level of physicality. And they'll see some of it. Iowa State's super, super physical. We've seen Baylor be really physical historically too. So they're gonna get more challenges. And I think that even though that sucked, and to have that happen on national TV and to see the number one play on SportsCenter be Sedona Prince getting dunked on by Ashlyn Watkins, those things are all tough, but they build tougher teams. And the one thing I know about Mark Campbell, that I know about Haley Van Lith, that I know about Sedona Prince in this program, is that loss I don't think would lead to a second loss. And it helps that they're going to have had a full week off. But this is a team that I think that they'll, when I was coaching, I coached, NAIA college basketball, and we had to go play Sac State. Mark Campbell wasn't there yet. And we got smoked. I mean, even a bad D1 program, which Sac State was at the time, versus an NAIA program, you're not the same level. We got beat by 40 or 50. And it was one of those games where I'm like, I'm not even watching the film. We're not watching this film. We're flushing this one. We're moving on. The thing that's different about me and Mark Campbell, well, there's many, but the thing in coaching that most stands out is they watched that film. And I guarantee it, they analyzed that film. And they went and they dissected it and said, okay, not what do we hang on to, but what do we fix? What do we adjust? And then how do we continue to be TCU basketball, knowing what we need to know if we want to be, playing in the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and beyond at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, for Haley Van Lith specifically. To get your teeth kicked in like that and then to show up in the post-game press conference is
and
something.
Own it. Yeah.
Is something. And that was impressive from her. I was impressed by that. As an alum, I was proud of that. I think it very easily could have been a day where Mark Campbell just says, just let me take it.
Yeah.
Today. Right. We didn't talk to any South Carolina players. We only got Dawn Staley.
Which was still really cool. I'm
but
not gonna lie.
you were sitting a foot away from her and you didn't reach up and try to touch her. I
didn't.
Very proud
I did
of you.
ask 2 questions, and I was so proud of myself for not being nervous.
Yeah,
and I did get
great.
one of those questions to get picked up by the NCAA Women's March Madness account.
Sure it did. It did.
That was cool.
It was the moon one, right?
Yeah.
We could play on the moon and fans would show up. But I was impressed. I was impressed by her character to show up in that moment post game and face people asking questions that she's heard a couple times in some tough losses. Most of those losses have come in tournament time though. So
she's a star, and what's really cool is she's all in with being a Horned Frog too.
Yep, it seems pretty cool. Melissa, some breaking transfer portal news before we get into the last fun topic of the evening. Connor Wegman, Texas A&M quarterback, has transferred to a team that TCU will be playing next year on the road. That is the University of Houston.
No. Wow, that is it. Man,
I like it.
I liked their quarterback that smoked us. I think he's got potential, but Wegman can throw and can still move. That's a great pickup for Houston.
I'll be interested to see what he looks like in that offense.
That could be a
Willie
really
Fritz gets
nice
his quarterback. Willie Fritz gets his quarterback in year
Be a
2.
Really nice pickup for Houston.
Be kind of interesting. All right, Melissa, I'm going to give you 3 names and where they're going to be coaching in 2025. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
The first one is William Belichick. Bill Belichick is going to be coaching the North Carolina Tar Heels, TCU's opening day opponent next year.
Love a celebrity coach on opening day.
August 30th at Chapel Hill. I am going to probably do a fun article on 24/7 this week about kind of projecting what famous person will be coaching TCU season openers beyond 2025.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Because like Stanford's on there, Duke's on there. I think Sam Houston State one year.
Andrew
like
Luck.
who's going to be coaching? Bill Belichick is going to be welcomed to college football by the TCU Horned Frogs in 2025.
Yeah. Again, the last time that we saw a celebrity head coach come in, completely overhaul a program and put his stamp on it, went really, really well. The one thing we know is there probably won't be an entirely new roster. There might be some film, but there probably will be quite a bit of new guys.
It would be pretty funny if TCU was coming back with North Carolina's old left tackle.
I would love that. I would love that for us. It's going to be fascinating. The Belichick to UNC thing is so fascinating to me on so many levels. Number one, it feels like you're not getting another NFL job, but you want to stay in coaching. So it also feels like an opportunity to install his son, who is the coach in waiting, right, according to the contract. Bill Belichick didn't get an NFL job because nobody wanted to allow him to be the GM. And in college football, he will be the GM. And while he did a good job of really developing talent, towards the end of his time in New England, even before Brady left, it seemed like his ability to collect the proper talent was taking a little bit of a dive. So I'm going to be fascinating. I think it was Nicole Auerbach who said, get ready to kiss up to the owner of a Toyota dealership season is like the things that he's going to have to do that I just don't see him being very good at. But I think he's a hell of a football coach. He's a brilliant football mind. Will he be able to relate to 18 to 22-year-olds? Will he want to deal with recruiting high school and transfer portal players? That remains to be seen. But I think he'll have a pretty killer staff, kind of like what we saw Dion do. And I hope that it takes him at least a couple of weeks of the season in 2025 to get things rolling.
You know, he did, in fact, hire a GM today.
Oh, he did? Okay, I missed that.
That would be one Michael Lombardi.
No way. No way.
Former NFL GM. Is going to serve as North Carolina's GM.
That is... Michael Lombardi is going to be... This is just, again, the thought experience we're getting in college football. That is... I already said this in the group text, but... can I call now getting to go to Bill Belichick's press conference in Chapel Hill? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We can both go. You could just Jeremy can hit record. We'll be fine.
No, I'll want to talk to Sonny after that game because I think it'll be a TCU win. But you can go talk to Bill.
All right, I'll go talk to Bill, yeah.
We can set up a camera in both spots. I think Bill Belichick's post-game press conference would do pretty well on the Frogs Insider YouTube channel. Yeah. Don Staley is doing pretty well right now. And Deion Sanders did pretty well a couple years ago. So, all right, next name. University of West Virginia. West Virginia University. Rocky Top. Just kidding. What is it?
Bob Denver's Country Roads.
Yeah. John Denver's Country Roads.
I'm so sorry, West Virginia. I am so tired.
Bob Denver's Rocky Top. The West Virginia Mountaineers.
Western Virginia Mountaineers.
Sorry. Let me do that again. Bob Denver's Rocky Top, Western Virginia. That is going to be one.
So disrespectful to the ghost of Neil Brown.
Well, the ghost of Neil Brown could have been App State's head coach and decided not to. He's going to end up at Charlotte, I think. Poor guy. Anywho, Richard Rodriguez, Rich Rod, the mastermind behind West Virginia's 2007 season, is back.
Which was 17 years ago.
Yep.
A high school senior ago.
Speaking of Bill Belichick,
Wow. Wow.
anywho, Rich Rodriguez is going to be West Virginia's coach starting again in 2025. He has most recently been at Jacksonville State, helped them transition from FCS to FBS with great success. I believe they won their conference this year. Maybe not.
They
Are
played
Sun
in the
Belt?
conference championship game.
No, they're not Sun Belt.
They played in the conference championship game. I don't remember if they won.
Um,
But they were very good. That's a
they were
good
very
football
good.
team. Yeah.
They were very good. And yeah, so this is interesting. I know that a number of big money people at West Virginia never stopped loving Rich Rodriguez, even though he left them for the quote unquote greener pastures of Michigan.
Pat McAfee wanted him bad too.
McAfee has been talking about him for a couple weeks now on his show on ESPN. Yeah, just another. And TCU travels to Morgantown next year, so 2 road games against first-year head coaches who are going to be looking to prove something to their fan bases.
That are far from first-year head coaches, but are first-year
Yes.
head coaches. Yeah.
Lastly,
UCF fans are so excited about this one.
it ain't the AAC anymore, though, but Scott Frost is going to be UCF's new
Feel it
old
chill in Florida.
head coach. He did have a really nice kind of wisdom moment in his reintroduction presser where he said, as you're climbing the ladder of success, nobody tells you to stop when you're happy.
Yeah. I thought that
And
was really actually very
it
poignant.
is really poignant. Obviously, he could have been really happy at Nebraska. I think his dad was sick. There were some other off-the-field issues there as well. But hey, who knows? Maybe the second time is the charm. We've seen it work a couple places, and now we're going to get to see firsthand if it works at West Virginia and UCF as well.
I reached out to my pal Jeremy Taché, who did the UCF preview with us, and he was very authentically really excited, and the fan base seems to be really fired up. Scott Frost was a great fit at UCF, and I truly hope that Scott Frost is super successful at UCF. I can't wait to see how Rich Rod plays out at West Virginia. That's a fan base that deserves a good football program. I don't want them to beat TCU, but that is absolutely a program I cheer for outside of when they play TCU, because that fan base is elite, and I really hope it works out that I can go to that game, because one of my favorite visiting game experiences of all time was the snow game at West Virginia when Kenny Hill threw a pick 6 on the very first play of the game, and it was very poor. It was a very bad day football-wise, but I had a blast the whole time. It was some of the nicest, best salt of the earth people you'll meet. So
Absolutely.
It's going to be fascinating. Like we didn't think this was going to be a super chaotic coaching carousel, and it wouldn't be, except for some of the names that are riding the horses around the circle, because this is hilariously delightful.
I just think the funniest thing about Bill Belichick being the North Carolina head coach is the guy who was clearly the runner-up that they basically said was the guy they were going to pivot to, which is Tommy Rees.
Yeah.
Like, how is Bill Belichick and Tommy Rees your top 2
Amazing.
at North Carolina? I just don't get it.
I can't wait for that game. I hope my favorite
can't.
chicken and waffles place is still exists over there.
Still
It's been
kicking?
15 years, yeah.
We'll have to figure out if it is and make our way there. Last little note before we wrap up the show. TCU does have another visitor coming in on Friday. He tweeted it out earlier this evening. It's a 2026 kid, defensive end, Jesse Ford from Arlington Martin. 4-star defensive end, number 15 overall player in Texas, number 120 overall player in the 2026 class. He has a top 8 currently of TCU, Arkansas, Kansas State, Texas, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, and Nebraska.
Listen,
So,
I'm going to take credit for this one because I've been back channeling my love and desire for Jesse Ford to end up at TCU through some of his high school friends, because I'm
There you
not
go.
in a weird way. I'm a high school teacher. But I, if you're not watching other YouTube, JB just made the most appropriate reaction to that. But some of his former and 7-on-7 teammates are students of mine, and so I've been encouraging them to say nice things about TCU. I don't know if they have, but I'm still going to take credit for him visiting regardless.
love that. Jesse Ford will be on campus on Friday.
Heck
This
of a
is
player.
this is the exact kind of dude that can thrive in an
Yeah.
Andy Avalos defense, and
Yeah.
we'll just leave it at that and see how his recruitment goes from there. That's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. She's Melissa Treebwasser. I'm Jamie Plunkett. We will be back at some point. I don't know exactly when. Probably Sunday. I
Yeah,
don't know.
probably Sunday
We'll
after
figure
the
it
women's
out.
game. Yeah,
After the
possible.
women's game, breaking down some visits from this weekend. TCU maybe will have a portal commitment or two by then to talk about, so we can get into that as well. But until then, make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.